Africa is on the rise. I mean, I just came back from working for 7 years in Latin America, and coming back to the region in Africa a few months ago, 6 months ago, I was struck by the dynamism I found, renewed dynamism that I found in the region. A dynamism which was not only from the public sector, but mainly from the private sector. We are coming out from a period where Africa has been growing steadily, around 5%. This is something which has been quite impressive in the current situation, where we know that most of the world has been growing up at a much lower rate. 15 years ago, I was at the IMF when I was working there. It was not something that we would have envisaged in our career, to see that Africa has a growth rate which is consistently higher than what we see in some of the OECD countries. And although it was a situation where you have a lot of bumps, throat, and up and downs, but the steadiness in the growth of Africa was something that was unseen in the past. So I think that we are right now in an environment, in a situation which is new, and we need really to continue and building on that. This has been translated really by the fact that FDI has been coming to Africa. We have the latest number we received were about 36 to 37 billion of FDI to Africa. It means that African countries are less perceived as being a risky direction to invest. And whenever you talk to people, I was in a forum with the African American community in the US, and it was clear that there were a lot of appetite in investing in Africa, and they were eager to understand better what was the dynamic of the private sector in Africa to be able to partner with them. So looking into it, what is appearing when we talk to policymakers are being some of the challenges that Africa is facing. So number one that we're hearing all the time is job creation. And I think that in spite of a steady growth, Africa is still struggling with a level of employment or underemployment which is pretty high. And I think that if I can take an anecdote in my life in public service, when I was a Minister for Finance, one day meeting a taxi driver who was telling me, stopped me and said, Mr. Minister, you're always talking about growth in your speech, but I don't eat growth. I want to eat growth. And he was right. He was right. He was right, because it was an opportunity for me to start and looking again at more the numbers. And what was a story beyond my own country? It was that the growth was really very much concentrated in capital-intensive sectors. And therefore, the spillover and the job creation was not there. So we were seeing the mining sector, the telecom sector after privatization, all sectors growing very, very fast. But in terms of job creation, we didn't have the impact that we wanted. So for the taxi driver, as he was saying, he was not eating growth. He was eating growth because we had some weaknesses among African policymakers in terms of redistributive policies. The gain of growth that were captured through the public, through the budget was not necessarily redistributed, or the policies were not put in place to create an environment which was conducive to job creation. And I think that's all the work that our colleagues working on the investment climate have been really pushing towards. Beyond the numbers, beyond the indicators, beyond all these kind of things, we're talking about people's life, real life. Because the investment climate, at the end of the day, aims only at create condition for job creation, and therefore building and strengthening the social contract that exists in our societies. That's why the World Bank have decided this year to focus its World Development Report on job creation. And in one of the things which are coming out from this report for 2013 is that you need obviously solid fundamentals, and I think African countries, if you look at across the board, have been really making huge progress in reducing inflation, improving revenue collection, reducing the fiscal deficit, being able to borrow on the capital market with a much lower spread because of the quality of the signature, etc., etc. Second type of issue was labor policies. And the labor policies also are linked to business environment. As we know, our countries often have inherited from the colonial past a set of policies in terms of labor regulation which were based on what was happening in Europe in the 50s, not in Europe of the 2000s. And there were a big lag of adjustment of those labor policies and laws to be able to respond to the reality of our continent, which includes a very large informal sector. So all this question linked to labor market policy obviously is something that is at the core, at the center of it. Because people are not only eager of having a job, but they want to have quality job. So people want to go beyond the informal sector type of job, which is precarious, which is not often has the level of productivity which allows them to have the level of income they expect, but want to have more robust type of job, which are much more resilient to external shocks that our continent is very prone to. We also, the third type of issues were linked to the role of government and the spatial economics in our country. We know that the agriculture sector is a large absorber of labor in our countries. And we have seen that the growth in the agricultural sector hasn't been as steady as the growth that we recorded in the service area, which has been very fast growing in Africa. And we saw in Africa large movement, large migration from rural area to urban area. As we speak now, certainly the migration and the growth rate of urban areas in Africa is certainly the fastest in the world. This creates a certain number of issues. It has some positive impact because by the concentration and agglomeration, we will have certainly learning by doing and more and higher level of productivity, but it poses a lot of other issues, which as service deliveries for people, and it leads often to creation of suboptimal condition and problem of housing, problem of housing, etc., in our cities. And that affects, in fine, the investment climate. So, looking forward, what can we say about what you can do? I would like first to say that private sector participation through private partnership is a key to it. And I would like really to congratulate all my colleagues from IFC who have been working very, very well in this area. And I've been able to help closing slowly the investment gap that Africa is facing. We're talking about infrastructure gap, which is around $30 billion a year. And so there is a lot to do. But our colleagues of IFC, working with the private sector, have been really being able to move aggressively. And my colleague Jingdong will tell you more about it. I believe that Africa portfolio has been one of the fastest growing portfolio of the IFC in the World Bank. So we have here an environment where the investment that the public sector branch of the World Bank, which is IBRD, which is us, with some colleagues like Gabe, we are in between, which are a little bit what you call the hinge between the private sector branch and the public sector branch of the World Bank, has been doing is try to help creating those conditions which are good macroeconomic policies, good climate investment, etc., to create really the condition for our colleagues from IFC to really move aggressively on this. And I think that the collaboration have led to very interesting results. I can't say that 3.8 billion have been invested in 50 PPPs, transaction in energy, transport, and water. And a part of it coming from the World Bank loans, and part of it coming from partial guarantees. And this afternoon, I know that my colleague Michel Wamza will be here to tell you a little bit more what we are doing on the guarantee side, which is a good way of leveraging our balance sheet in the World Bank. I can give you some example of PPPs that have been moved. One is Azito project in Côte d'Ivoire. We have recently moved the Lampanga dam in Cameroon, which are kind of one of these type of transformational projects that we would like to have in Africa. But that being said, you can have the best ICA in the world, you can have the best policy, if you don't have the basic infrastructure, it leads to very little result. And when you talk to the private sector, that's what they tell you. They tell you, yes, it's nice, the policies are improving, we are seeing much more understanding from the public sector, but guess what? I'm running my business with a power generator in my backyard. How can I compete with people who are receiving electricity at 5 cents a kilowatt, when I have to produce it at 30 cents a kilowatt? This is one of the reasons why in the priorities that I'm setting coming to this as Vice President for Africa is really to accelerate and start moving aggressively on the energy front. I know that the infrastructure agenda is large. There are a lot of things to be done, but I would like to have a particular interest in energy, because hearing the policymakers, hearing the private sector throughout Africa is something which is constantly coming back. Energy, energy, reliable, well-priced energy, and to allow them to have some more predictability in this. We also would like to say that while we are doing the PPPs, we've been working with countries and improving individually their PPP framework. But this is not, to my view, the solution for PPPs if you want to bring them to the level you want. I engaged around this spring meeting. I spoke to a couple of ministers for finance in West Africa, and I put forward to them when I was at the Frank Zone meeting in Paris last week, and when I started meeting with them, about the possibility of thinking about a common framework for PPPs for all countries in the West African Monetary Union. So I will try to engage all the regional economic organizations, East African Commission, SADC, COMESA, around this agenda. Can we think more and more, instead of having a PPP framework which is country by country, and therefore limit the possibility of large-scale regional investment, can we move towards having a regional framework which makes it much easier for investors to move ahead? So this is the type of agenda that we are trying to set forward. The second is Africa have a low level of savings. And macroeconomists, we say that we need to have a balance between saving and investment as a whole. But in spite of it, the current level of savings in Africa is not totally used. And I think that there are some initiatives now in terms of mobilizing the resources of institutional investors, which will help us making huge step forward. Because without having those institutional investors channeling some of their resources in productive investment, it will be very difficult to mobilize through the World Bank, the IFC, or the government saving to have the level of saving which allows them to invest in productive infrastructure projects. So I think the next frontier is to start create instruments which give the comfort of institutional investors, pension fund or others, to be able to have instruments that allow them to invest in those long-term regional projects such as dam, hydro, etc., which are key to unleashing growth in Africa. So this is the type of question that we are kind of discussing at the World Bank in the Africa region and with our colleague from IFC. And that's something that we think reflect a little bit the conversation that we had with the private sectors in terms of constraints to growth in Africa. And we know that this type of forum and all these forums that will be organized will help to create a conversation around those, but more importantly, define some very concrete steps on how to move forward this agenda of building instruments, of channeling domestic savings in Africa, and creating conditions for having much more intra-African investment.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.